there, you're watching India Global on NDTV. I'm Maha Siddiqui. The global flux and geopolitical shifts are changing the world rapidly. In this evolving global scenario, we'll decode India's position on global matters and be your window to the world. Before we get into the core of the big stories this week, let's give you a glimpse of what we've packed for you in the next half an hour on India Global. First, China renames 11 places in Arunachal Pradesh, then objects to Home Minister Amit Shah's visit to the state. Is China hardening its position on what it calls South Tibet? India rejects China's attempts of invented names, but how can New Delhi arrest the dragon's worrying moves along the LAC? That's the bottom line this week. Pakistan rakes up Kashmir again, objects to the G20 working group meeting on tourism in Srinagar in May. India's response: Kashmir is an inalienable part of India. After a meeting in Arunachal Pradesh's Itanagar, now one in Kashmir, India's move sends out a message to the neighbours, loud and clear. Ukrainian Deputy Foreign Minister comes calling with a message that President Zelensky wants to participate in the September G20 summit under India's presidency. This leaves India in a tricky situation as old and tested friend Russia has outrightly rejected Ukraine war being discussed on the G20 platform. As Russia, with the backing of China, hardens its position, will India be able to get a consensus going? The bottom line: India has rejected objections from China over Home Minister Amit Shah's visit to Arunachal Pradesh. It said such objections do not change the ground reality, which is that Arunachal Pradesh was, is and will remain an integral and inalienable part of India. China said the Home Minister's visit to the area was a violation of Beijing's territorial sovereignty, as it claims Arunachal to be South Tibet, and has also renamed 11 places in Arunachal Pradesh in Mandarin just days before this current move. Why is China trying to provoke India? And this time, when India is expected to be hosting the Chinese President Xi Jinping for the SCO and G20 summits in months from now. More in this report.
माननीय केंद्रीय गृह मंत्री महोदय जी से निवेदन करते हैं, कृपया अपने कर कमलों से रिमोट का बटन दबाकर वाइब्रेंट विलेज प्रोग्राम का शुभारंभ करें।
Home Minister Amit Shah in Arunachal Pradesh, inaugurating a critical infrastructure project, the Vibrant Villages program. The event coming just days after. China once again decided to needle India by naming 11 places in the state in Mandarin. And then again, objecting to the Home Minister's visit to the border state Arunachal.
藏南是中国的领土，印方高官赴藏南活动，侵犯了中国领土主权，不利于边境地区的和平安宁，中方对此坚决反对。
A response coming indirectly, first from the Home Minister, and then very direct from the Ministry of External Affairs.
हम गर्व के साथ कहते हैं, वो जमाने चले गए जब भारत की भूमि का कोई अतिक्रमण कर सकता था। आज 100 की सुई की नोक जितनी भूमि का भी अतिक्रमण कोई नहीं कर सकता, क्योंकि आईटीबीपी और भारतीय सेना यहाँ पर उपस्थित है।
The objection is beyond reason. Such objections will not change ground reality. Senior leaders visit Arunachal like any other state in India. Arunachal is, was and will remain an inalienable part of India. Even as the friction in eastern Ladakh continues for the third consecutive year now, China simultaneously tried opening up another front in the eastern sector on the line of actual control in Arunachal Pradesh. In June 2020, China suddenly claimed Bhutan's Sakting sanctuary as disputed. The claim was worrisome for India too, as the wildlife sanctuary borders Arunachal's Tawang district. In January 2021, satellite images showed China had built dual-use villages along the line of actual control near the upper Subansiri district. A move to get civilians to occupy areas that had so far been uninhabited. What's more, these villages can double up as military bases when required. In December 2022, Chinese and Indian troops clashed in the Tawang sector. Soldiers on both sides sustained minor injuries. Over the last several years, India has been trying to enhance infrastructure development along the LAC in Arunachal Pradesh. In January this year, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh dedicated 28 infrastructure projects of Border Roads Organisation worth over 700 crores to the nation. From Siom Bridge on along Rinkyong Road in Arunachal Pradesh. Out of the 22 bridges under the project, there are 5 earmarked for Arunachal Pradesh. The upping of connectivity on the Indian side, as per experts, is perceived by Beijing as a threat. Though ironically, Beijing itself has been engaged in rapid infrastructure development along the LAC.
So what do experts believe? How should India be tackling China? Let me bring in Lobsang Sangye. He's the former president, that's Sikyong, of the Tibetan government in exile. Many thanks, Dr. Sangye, for speaking with NDTV. My first question is with regards to the renaming of places in Arunachal Pradesh that China has undertaken. It's done so before in 2017 and in 2021. Why do you think this time around they've undertaken the same exercise again?
This is a well-planned strategy of the Chinese government because they want to be number one in the world and they see India as a potential number two and they want to make sure that India is put in place. And I have been on the record that if there is a war between India and China, it won't be most likely not in Doklam or in Galwan, but in Arunachal Pradesh because they are better prepared. They have better infrastructure. They have a military airfield. There's a military township across Arunachal Pradesh in Tibet, and also railway line connecting from China to Lhasa to Arunachal, border of Arunachal Pradesh. So that's why this is a way to they're not renaming, but they're rather reviving the old traditional names of all these places, and thereby making a legal case. If they have to go to the International Court of Justice to say that, look, we have a track record of all the tax records, administrative records to show that these are the places that belong to Tibet. Now, India calls Tibet an autonomous region of China, thereby giving them the legitimacy. So if Tibet is part of China, as per India, then these areas belong to Tibet and hence belong to China. That is their claim. And in 1914, as per the similar agreement, we made it very clear that through the demarcation, Megmon line was drawn, and this area, which China claims to be part of China now, actually we ceded to India. So it is, the area that belongs to India, but similar agreement was signed by Tibet. Now, Indian government has to recognize.
Dr. Sangye, are you suggesting then that this is a clear means that China is using to create new realities on the ground and hoping that they can legitimize it later on?
Oh yes, I think they are reclaiming this based on Tibetan documents, right? So they are setting a precedent now. So if there is a war and if they fight over Arunachal and take over Tawang, they will say this land belonged to us all along. Now, Indian government has to come out and say no. Similar agreement was signed and this territory was ceded by the government of Tibet to India. To do that, now government of India must give some recognition to Central Tibet administration as a legal entity which reflects and represents Tibetan people, so they can be spokesperson on Tibet and Tibetan people.
Dr. Sangay, you've often warned India of the 5 fingers of Tibet strategy of China. Do you believe that they are actually trying to execute this strategy?
Oh yes, they've been doing it since 1950s. 1962 war in Arunachal, and then 1967 war attempted in Sikkim area. Now all the 5 fingers, Nepal is under pressure, Ladakh is under pressure, Bhutan is under pressure, Sikkim is under pressure, increasingly so, Arunachal Pradesh is under pressure. So 5 fingers is not only their strategy, it's in full implementation. And then of the naming of all the places, the first area, right, Pangchen, that, borders Chona in Tibet Autonomous Region, right, and that is in close proximity to Bhutan. So thereby, renaming Tibetan name Pangchen, definitely, Doklam and Bhutan is also made into a case.
So, Dr. Sangay, then that brings me to my next question. Then is it very intrinsically linked, the moves that we've seen recently, to the China-Bhutan boundary talks that are on and which look on track at the moment and could be worrisome for India in the context of what you just mentioned, Doklam?
Absolutely. Bhutan is clearly under pressure. I'm sure this carrot and stick approach is going on as far as Bhutan is concerned. And, given the pressure, now they have to deal with, China. And then if China is brought into the equation, what happens is that they will be dealing on the basis of Tibetan documents, Bhutan, right? And then Chinese government will say, now, Bhutan has set a precedent and recognized the old Tibetan names of these places. Similarly, the renaming of these places in Arunachal Pradesh should be valid. So that is their strategy.
Let's move on now, and Beijing's aggression continues towards Taiwan as well. Now, China's 3-day military drills, dubbed the Joint Assault, saw warships and fighter jets simulate targeted strikes on self-ruled Taiwan. This was in response to the island's president meeting the US House Speaker. China launched its drills on last Saturday after warning of a furious response if Taiwan's president Tsai Ing-wen met with US House Speaker Kevin McCarthy the week before in the United States. Well, the meeting went ahead in California on the 5th of April when Tsai was on her way back to Taipei from a trip to 2 of Taiwan's Latin American allies. And so started Beijing's jets and ships carrying out training exercises around Taiwan from all sides, especially the east, which it hadn't done earlier ever. Vast exercises aimed at Taiwan were from mainland China, that is from the western side. The exercises appear designed to flex Beijing's military muscle in front of Taiwan, United States and the world. The drills culminated on Monday with simulated attacks using fighter jets carrying out live ammunition and a sealing off of Taiwan in maritime drills. They involved China's Shandong aircraft carrier, one of the 2 in its fleet, which had sailed through Taiwan's southeastern waters to the western Pacific hours before Tsai met McCarthy. In an indication of the magnitude of the games, Japan said that it had scrambled jets in recent days as Chinese fighter planes landed and took off from Shandong in waters near southern Japan and Taiwan. Tsai responded to China's drills by pledging to continue working with the United States in the face of Chinese aggression. Taiwan's defense ministry enacted air, land and sea combat readiness protocols, placing the island on high alert. Taipei's forces have since carried out defensive air missions to show its capabilities and to prepare for any serious incursion from Chinese forces. Let's move on now. Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Emine Zafarova was in India this week, the first visit by the Ukrainian side since the start of the war. In the meantime, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has visited India twice, in April last year and in March this year for the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting. Ukraine has openly expressed its displeasure in the past over India's position on the Ukraine war. So what has changed now? Why is Ukraine looking towards India? Here's what was the purpose of the visit, at least from what we know and what was said by the Deputy Foreign Minister. First of all, what she wanted was India to consider the G20 participation of Ukraine. They want their officials to participate in various meetings, and that's not all. The other reason for the visit was also to hand over a letter to Meenakshi Lekhi, which was actually addressed for the Prime Minister and from President Zelensky. The letter, the contents of which have not been revealed. However, we do know that a request has been made for President Zelensky to be able to address the G20 summit, and that's certainly going to be something that's tricky for India. Meanwhile, they also want a symbolic visit of the Prime Minister and the NSA, Ajit Doval. In fact, it was pretty much announced by the Deputy Foreign Minister, Emin Zafarova, that Ajit Doval will be travelling to Ukraine. And they are also looking at more humanitarian aid, including medicines and medical supplies from India. Now, interestingly, Emin Zafarova drew parallels between Ukraine's invasion by neighbour Russia to India's difficult neighbourhood with Pakistan on the one side and China on the other. She said the annexation of Crimea was a lesson for India to recognize the dangers of not stopping impunity at the right time. She met senior Ministry of External Affairs officials, the Deputy NSA Vikram Misri, and also Meenakshi Lekhi, the Minister of State in the Ministry of External Affairs, to whom she handed over a letter from President Zelensky to Prime Minister Modi. "14 months since the start of the war, Ukraine sends its first emissary to India. Deputy Foreign Minister Emin Zafarova was in India for 2 days this week. She came to New Delhi with a clear agenda to ask for Ukraine's participation in the G20 summit under India's presidency.
We believe that discussion about economy and the future economy and economic situation in the world is not possible without frank discussion about the repercussions of the war of Russia against Ukraine. I believe that my president would be also happy to speak up on behalf of Ukrainian people and to also explain what is the impact of the war to the world economy as well as to the Ukrainian economy in my country, in Ukraine.
The minister also handed over a letter from President Zelensky to Prime Minister Modi. The move by Ukraine puts India in a tricky situation, as Russia has already made its stand clear on the inclusion of Ukraine war in the G20 agenda.
Nobody was giving a damn about anything except finances and macroeconomic policies, which G20 was formed for. These days, when it is not something which the West is doing, believing this, that it's right, when Russia has, after many years of warnings, started to defend itself, there is nothing except Ukraine which is of interest for G20.
Russia and China had objected to the joint communique at the G20 finance ministers meeting in February and then the foreign ministers meeting in March to include 2 paragraphs related to Ukraine. The same ones, ironically, that were included in the Bali Declaration and to which none had any objection. As per Russia, much has changed between November last year and this year for them to accept the same communique language. While India's relations with Russia are well known now, Ukraine urged for starting a new chapter in the ties with Kiev too. The foreign minister also drew parallels between the Russian aggression against a neighbour to India's difficult neighbourhood of Pakistan and China. She said the war in Ukraine had lessons for India too.
Now I think that Ukrainian people have no fear anymore, so we understand that this war is an existential war and the war with neo-colonial ambition of our neighboring leader who questions the very existence of Ukraine, and I think that Indian people can really feel this because he also had this kind of pages in your history. The second part of my speech is justice is important because, as I said, Crimean lesson teaches us one thing, that whenever aggression is not brought to accountability, it has a repetition, it becomes bigger.
Ukraine has also sought more humanitarian aid from India. More importantly, medicines and medical supplies. As a welcome gesture on its part, it has also formally communicated that the Indian medical students who had to flee Ukraine due to the war can take the Unified State Qualification exam from India itself. Well, let's now take a look at how Ukraine's tone on India has changed over the last 1 year. Earlier, Kyiv was critical of India for not condemning Russia, and the Ukrainian foreign minister had in fact slammed India as well for buying Russian oil and not condemning Russia in the terms that they wanted to. The Ukrainian foreign minister had said importing cheap Russian oil was morally inappropriate. Ukraine had accused India of bankrolling Russian war machine. But now, Ukraine seems to have changed its tone. India saw the first visit by the Ukrainian side since the start of the war. The deputy foreign minister visited India on over 2 days of a visit over here. Ukraine is not in a position to instruct India, were the clear words that were used by the deputy foreign minister. And she also called India a Vishwaguru, saying that India should play a bigger role and try to bring some sort of a resolution in ending this war in Ukraine. Also saying that all this perhaps looking like a departure from what the foreign minister had said. However, she didn't comment on that. The Russian deputy foreign minister called for a deeper relationship with India as well. This has been the change in the tonality of, or the tone rather, of Ukraine towards India, perhaps looking at some sort of participation in the G20 summit. Well, and the beautiful Valley of Kashmir will host the G20 working group meeting on tourism as officials of the biggest economies of the world congregate in Srinagar. The world's eyes will be on Kashmir, an issue Pakistan has tried desperately to get third-party intervention over and also to internationalize over the last few years. So as expected, Pakistan has objected and India has rejected that objection. What is the message India is sending out through this decision? Nazir Masoodi reports from Srinagar.
Srinagar, undergoing a massive makeover ahead of the G20 Tourism Working Group meeting next month. The first major international event hosted in Kashmir post the revocation of the region's special constitutional status in 2019. Footpaths and cycle tracks are being laid, and city residents have been requested to undertake facade improvement of their homes, especially of properties located along main roads.
The significance of third tourism working group meeting of G20 in Kashmir goes beyond tourism. Holding meeting here in itself is a huge statement by India that Kashmir is no longer a dispute and it's an integral part of the country. Meeting of world's most powerful club may well be seen as an endorsement of India's stay.
Preparations are underway in full swing. As you see, Srinagar is right now preparing itself for welcoming the G20 delegates.
We don't see Kashmir through the prism of the conflict, militancy. It has much more to offer, and perhaps this event would be time to show that.
This is a great opportunity, like I said, for everybody to come here, and I would like to take this occasion through you to invite almost everybody in the rest of the country. We've had great participation from domestic tourists in the rest of the country who have come last year, like I said, in record-breaking numbers. We see this as a great opportunity to showcase J&K to the world.
Pakistan has opposed the move to hold a G20 meeting in Jammu and Kashmir. While China has backed Pakistan's sentiment, India has dismissed Pakistan and China's objections.
ये जो G20 के जो इवेंट्स हो रहे हैं, ये जो मीटिंग्स हो रही हैं, ये पूरे भारत में और मतलब भारत के हर क्षेत्र में हो रही हैं, ऑर्गेनाइज की जा रही हैं, और इसमें जम्मू एंड कश्मीर में और लद्दाख में करना बहुत नेचुरल है, और क्योंकि ये जगह हम हमेशा से भारत के अभिन्न और अविभाज्य अंग मानते हैं और हमारे हैं.
On Thursday, Home Minister Amit Shah held a meeting with top officials to review arrangements and asked all agencies to work in a coordinated manner.
After revocation of Article 370, central government organized multiple visits of foreign diplomats to the valley as an attempt to change perceptions about situation in Kashmir. G20 meeting in Srinagar is seen as a bigger event to showcase Kashmir coming out of its turbulent shadows and dehyphenating from Pakistan. The question is, will all the member countries attend the meeting? In Srinagar, Nazir Masoodi for NDTV.
Well, that's it this week on India Global. See you again next Friday with a deep dive of India's engagement with the world. Till then, bye-bye.